Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks to Rich McFadden for filling in for me last Friday. Jim Geraghty of National Review is here, of course. And, Jim, we have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And we begin with the good, which is kind of a double-barreled good, really. The recounts are over. We've had some bizarre, not really officially concession speeches, but in reality, they're concession speeches. Stacey Abrams acknowledges that Brian Kemp will be certified as the next governor. If that's not a concession, I'm not really sure how else you would define that. Over the weekend, we've also found out that the Republicans are going to win those two major statewide races in Florida. The machine recount confirmed that Ron DeSantis has defeated Andrew Gillum in the governor's race, and the hand recount made it clear that Rick Scott is going to hang on against Bill Nelson. So that means 52 seats at least for the Republicans, 53 if they can hang on in Mississippi. And that means they're going to have more Senate seats in the next Congress than they do right now. But that's only part one of the good martini. This is the Florida Sun-Sentinel. Just hours after finishing a tumultuous election recount, Broward Supervisor of Elections, Brenda Snipes, submitted her resignation, ending a 15-year tenure full of botched elections, legal disputes, and blistering criticism. Quote, "It's true. She did send it," said Bernadette Norris Weeks, an attorney who works as counsel to the Supervisor of Elections office. Evelyn Perez Verdilla, a former office spokeswoman who left several years ago, said Sunday evening she was told by people in the office that the letter was sent to Tallahassee earlier in the day. Jim, you'll never guess why Brenda Snipes is resigning. Because politicians never use this excuse. She actually wants to spend more time with her family. So what do you make of the results that we thought were official 2 weeks ago are now official? And the fact that Brenda Snipes, who has been responsible for botched vote counting, not getting things on the ballot that should have been, and all sorts of other errors over the years, is about to hit the bricks.
Yeah, I mean, when she says she wants to spend time with her family, Greg, according to the letter, she wants to spend time with her whole family, all 2 to 9 of them. However many people are in her family, she has a very tough time keeping track and counting and all that stuff. So with a high margin of error, her whole family. Look, can we say she left on a high note? This isn't quite leave them wanting more, although in today's Morning Jolt, she may actually be an improvement over her predecessor. It was interesting. There was some, Andrea Mitchell, among others, was saying, she's actually a Republican. No, she's not. She was appointed by Jeb Bush way back in 2003 because the previous election supervisor in Broward County did an even worse job. In other words, Brenda Snipes is the good supervisor of elections people in Broward County. This is the improvement. Still a long ways to go, including claims of losing thousands of ballots and things like that. Republicans winning the recounts is good news. It is pretty much what was expected since election night. We've never seen a change of more than 500 some votes and stuff like that. So when you've got a lead in the 1,000 or in the tens of thousands, you shouldn't really expect it to change even with a recount. Had a little bit of a back and forth with somebody on Facebook on this on Friday or late last week. Greg, it's not the recount I mind, particularly when it's close. Okay, fine, go right ahead. But when the margin is that sizable, and it's very clear you're not going to find a secret cache of 20,000 votes or something like that, I would like the candidates who are down by 5-figure totals to acknowledge that they're down by 5-figure totals. And let the candidate who has won and who is leading and who is, to acknowledge reality, to just be upfront and say, I don't expect this recount to change the results. I just want to go forward with it. There's nothing wrong with wanting the most precise vote count you can, particularly if you want to run again someday and you want to know exactly where you have to do better next time around. But all in all, this was pretty obvious from election night that even though it was close in terms of percentage points, in terms of sums of votes, that this was how it was going to shake out. And Greg, I don't know, I'm just thrilled to see somebody resign when something goes wrong in government, particularly in Florida. It's not like the sheriff's resigning down there in Broward County, right, Greg?
That's right. Scott Israel.
I mean,
yeah.
Other than your right to vote and your right to be protected from terrible, vicious school shooters, they're really great down there in Broward County. They're 0 for 2 on 2 major issues down there. People are grumbling, she's still going to be able to get her pension this way, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's not ideal, but in the end, look, there are a lot of times we've seen public officials get caught with a terrible mismanagement or incompetence, and then they either, hunker down and wait it out, or they make just a whole bunch of counter charges. They go on paid leave, which is really another way of saying paid vacation. So it's nice to see there's actually going to be some sort of change. And based on this improvement we saw from Snipes from her predecessor, Miriam Oliphant, Greg, I think the next couple of years in Broward County, you could have really modest disasters. Nowhere near the level of disasters they've had. Really, much more modest levels of incompetence, neglect, and mismanagement. So the future is bright in Broward County, Greg.
All right, exit question on this. What's the verdict on Marco Rubio sounding the alarm on this? You got folks on the right saying, well, Rick Scott, they could never tell the state how many ballots they had left to count. He went from up nearly 60,000 down to about 15 and eventually 12 and then 10,000. So if the Republicans hadn't sounded the alarm, this could have gone on forever. And you got the Democrats saying, look, Scott and DeSantis, they still won by 10,000 or 30,000 votes here. You guys were crying wolf. This is just a big embarrassment for Marco Rubio, who was making claims of stolen election efforts.
Wait a second. What he was pointing out was the very obvious point that every other county in the state could know on election night how many people voted. You'd think that'd be the first easiest thing to figure out from every single precinct and polling place. Hey, you opened at 7, you closed at 7. How many people showed up? How many absentee ballots you got? Places that had been hit by Category 4 hurricanes managed to pull that off on election night. The idea that Broward County, days later, never mind they haven't counted the votes and given the vote totals for the Senate race and for the governor's race and all that. We don't know how many people voted. Like that's what was absolutely ridiculous about that. That's where I think Rubio was completely within his marks. Look, we've seen this in a lot of states, in a lot of places. And I'm not saying that there's, vast, I want to, get involved in, the suspicion of vast conspiracies. But look, if you're going to try to cheat an election, or if you're going to try to steal an election, what you need is all the counties to report their votes so that last county knows how many more votes they need to manufacture. And we've seen, in a whole bunch of states, there's always one county that's always the last one to report on election night. And it's not that the population is way higher than everybody else. Miami-Dade didn't have any of these problems. You can't say, this is, Florida Democrats, they're corrupt. No, Florida has a whole bunch of Democratic cities. There are a bunch of places where Democrats control the election apparatus, and they don't have these kinds of issues. I mean, this isn't a Democratic issue. This is a Broward County Democratic issue. And my suspicion is Rubio knows what he's talking about. I give him credit for sounding the alarm. I don't think that'll ever change people. He's a squish, and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say kudos to Senator Rubio. Even if there was no evidence that the election was quote unquote being stolen, at some point does a level of incompetence become on a menace on par with the possibility of being stolen.
Fascinating. All right, let's move on to our bad martini now. And Jim, while I was away on Friday, we got the court ruling on Jim Acosta that the White House has to reinstate his hard pass and let him back into the briefing room. My favorite moment was when Acosta walked through the gates, walked up to the reporters uninvited and said, so do you have questions? And of course, he loved every second of that. He loves being the story, which we've talked about before. But I believe that was the premise for why Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday asked Donald Trump about this, and specifically called up a quote from a Navy admiral who has had negative things to say about Trump in the past, about how his attacks on the press are the greatest threat to our democracy. So here's that exchange, first of all, on Fox News Sunday.
Bill McRaven, retired admiral, Navy SEAL, 37 years, former head of U.S. Special Operations.
Hillary Clinton fan.
Special Operations.
Excuse me, Hillary Clinton fan.
Who led the operations, commanded the operations that took down Saddam Hussein and that killed Osama bin Laden, says that your sentiment is the greatest threat to democracy in his lifetime.
He's a Hillary Clinton backer and an Obama backer. And frankly,
he was a Navy SEAL.
Wouldn't it have been nice if we got Osama bin Laden a lot sooner than that?
That's classic Trump right there, always getting in the unrelated dig. Jim, here's MSNBC for some reason reporting the response that McRaven gave to CNN about the Fox interview.
So McRaven last year, as you heard Chris Wallace say, called the president's attacks on the media possibly the greatest threat to American democracy he'd ever seen. And now McRaven says he stands by those comments. He tells CNN, quote, "I did not back Hillary Clinton or anyone else. I am a fan of President Obama and President George W. Bush, both of whom I worked for. I admire all presidents, regardless of their political party, who uphold the dignity of the office and who use that office to bring the nation together in challenging times."
So, Jim, strong words from McRaven. Trump, of course, fires back with the bazooka like he always does. What's the impact of all this?
This is why President Trump can just be a Dagwood sandwich of frustration, layer upon layer. Because when you hear, General McRaven has called you the greatest threat to democracy in his lifetime. McRaven's been around a long time. Worse than Al-Qaeda? Worse than ISIS? Worse than the Soviet Union? Worse than Iran? Really? Really? President Trump is the worst menace to beset this country in that entire time? I think it's safe to argue. I don't doubt that, Admiral McRaven, or is it Admiral or General?
Admiral.
All right. My apologies for calling him a general earlier. Admiral McRaven, believes what he believes, and he feels very strongly about it. But I don't think that you can say. I think there's a lot of areas to push back against that sentiment. Trump manages to pick the absolute. When he says he's a Hillary Clinton, he was a Hillary Clinton fan. I don't believe he ever officially endorsed him. But if you want to say, look, he was part of the previous administration, part of the previous command structure. Of course, he's going to defend the status quo. I'm disrupting the status quo. There's areas Trump can go in to defend his record here that would probably turn out just fine. But my suspicion is that, of course, he couldn't do that. And he had to say, wouldn't it have been nicer to pick up Osama bin Laden earlier, like they were dilly-dallying, like they were just taking their time and being leisurely about it. This is getting, borderline close to truther territory. This idea that, the government could have picked up bin Laden sooner. Then, of course, you're like, everyone's, hears this, cringes, groans. Even people who are traditionally fans of the president, like, oh, God, why are you going down this road? Naturally, this morning, Greg, that Trump managed to double down on it. He tweeted about 2 hours ago, of course, we should have captured Osama bin Laden long before we did. I pointed him out in my book just before the attack on the World Trade Center. President Clinton famously missed his shot. We paid Pakistan billions of dollars, and they never told us he was living there. Fools. Well, here we go. First step. There's one reference to bin Laden in Trump's book from 2000. It is a passing reference. By no means is this Trump laying out his plan to capture bin Laden before the 9/11 attacks. Secondly, if you want to gripe about Bill Clinton's record on counterterrorism, I think there's a lot of room to do that. But I don't think you could say, that capturing bin Laden was ever going to be easy, even back when he was protected by the Taliban. The U.S. obviously was attempting to do that almost immediately after the 9/11 attacks. Lost him at Tora Bora. This stuff is not simple and easy and magic wand, you can wave a hand to it. We paid Pakistan billions of dollars and they never told us he was living there. Look, there's been a lot of research to whether there's any evidence the Pakistani government knew that Osama bin Laden was hiding in a compound at Abbottabad. Yes, he was only a few miles away from the military academy that was there. According to Directorate S by Steve Cole and every other major person who's looked at this, there is no definitive proof ever came across that anybody in the Pakistani government knew that bin Laden was there. Maybe some of them have suspicions, sure, but there's really no evidence that the Pakistani government had protected bin Laden. I think it's safe to say that if there was evidence that the Pakistani government had taken efforts to protect bin Laden, there would be a de facto state of war between the United States and Pakistan. Did I leave anything out? Oh, and finally, one last thing, Greg, on top of all this. So, Robert O'Neill, the man who fired the shot that killed Osama bin Laden, tweeted earlier this morning, quote, "The mission to get bin Laden was bipartisan. We all wanted to get him as soon as we could." Now, those of us who follow Robert O'Neill on Twitter get a pretty clear viewpoint of his perspective on all kinds of political issues. First of all, God bless him. Secondly, he's not going to go out and rebuke the president unless he really thinks he's gone out and stepped in it. And I think that, the O'Neill assessment is completely correct. Take it from the men who were there. The president is once again running his mouth. And what's fascinating is he's running his mouth in a defense of himself that is probably the worst possible defense he could attempt to mount, instead of saying, well, McRaven's entitled to his opinion, but I'm doing things differently. And, that's the way things stand. I'm proud of my record, and we're going to get great results for the American people, yada, yada, yada.
Jim, I still remember, I think it was the fall of 2001 when there were reports that Osama bin Laden was surrounded at Tora Bora, and I was thinking to myself, I should stay at the office until we get confirmation that we've got him. I would have stayed at the office for 10 years if that had been the case. So I know there's not a lot that we can build a bipartisan consensus on these days, but the fact that bin Laden's gone, I think that should be something we can all cheer.
You can read the Steve Cole book. You can read The Looming Tower. There are a lot of good books that have been written about the war on terror. I think I have Jawbreaker by one of the first guys on the ground. The short version, this stuff is really hard. This is, small mountain villages and paths, and it's remote. It's not easy to get air power in there. The manpower was short. They hit Tora Bora with every bit of ordnance they possibly could get their hands on in that period of time. Deep networks of caves, booby traps, unreliable allies. You bribe somebody to be on your side, and you hope that they stay bribed to stay on your side. I mean, this was tough. I have no doubt that everybody in our military complex, did they make mistakes? Sure, it's wartime. Nobody's ever perfect in wartime. Mistakes are going to get made. But everybody did their damnedest, and really the idea of all the possible criticisms you could make of McRaven to say, oh, he dilly-dallied and was too slow to capture bin Laden. I salute the president for picking the absolute dumbest defense he could possibly select at that moment.
All right, Jim, let's move on to our crazy martini now. And once upon a time, Kirsten Powers was a Democrat you could have a conversation with. Maybe that's back when she was a Fox News contributor, but I remember that she was horrifically critical of Kermit Gosnell. She was very much appalled by what he had done in that abortion clinic in Philadelphia. She was very critical of the Obama administration's handling of Benghazi, for instance. And then she wrote a book just a couple of years ago about how the left was killing free speech. Doesn't seem to appear that she still thinks that way. She's now a CNN contributor. And one of the big questions coming out of the midterms is, hey, what's up with white women and why are they still voting for Republicans so much of the time? Well, that was the question that Don Lemon asked Kirsten Powers, and here is her extended response.
There's been a lot of talk about why white women support President Trump despite of, or perhaps because of, his policies and his tone. What's your take on this?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways that we have to look at this. I think one of the first things is that people will say that they support him for reasons other than his racist language, which we don't have time to go through, but there's all sorts of things starting from the launch of his campaign all the way up until the latest campaign, the way he demonized people trying to come to our country on the caravan. And they'll say, well, I'm not racist. I just voted for him because, I didn't like Hillary Clinton. And I just want to say that that doesn't make you not racist. It actually makes you racist. If you support somebody who does racist things, that makes you racist. So I just want to establish that. As for why white women do it, I think we have to recognize that white men are doing it as well. But I think sometimes we would hope that we would get better behavior from white women because white women are themselves oppressed and that they would therefore be able to align themselves with other oppressed people. But I think we have to remember that the white patriarchal system actually benefits white women in a lot of ways. And they're attached to white men who are benefiting from the system that was created by them, for them. And their fathers and their husbands and their brothers are benefiting from the system. And so they are also benefiting.
So you're racist and you're part of the patriarchy, even as an oppressed woman. Jim, this is some interesting and creative verbiage here.
Now, Greg, I want to go all the way back. Let's get in the time machine. Quick, get into the DeLorean. I'm going to go all the way back to 2015, Greg. It's not that long ago when Kirsten Powers was working for Fox News, a Fox News contributor, and she had published by Regnery Publishing, the very fine folks, fine publishers of heavy lifting, now available at bookstores everywhere, quote, The Silencing, How the Left is Killing Free Speech. And I brought up the promotional page for it, Greg, and I want to read to you a bit about what Kirsten Powers, who just denounced the white male patriarchy and the numerous racist things that are said, and basically declare that Trump voters are racist. 3 years ago, here's what Kirsten Powers was writing. In The Silencing, Kirsten Powers, herself a proud liberal, but from a far more tolerant Jeffersonian tradition, exposes the illiberal left. In The Silencing, you'll learn why the illiberal left has become an Orwellian big brother, policing what it deems acceptable speech and opinions. How the illiberal left is obsessed with delegitimizing Fox News. How illiberal left pundits, even self-proclaimed feminists, and Powers names names, engage in outrageously misogynistic and sexist dismissals of their female opponents. Greg, do you think like dismissing white women as a group for voting for Trump would count as that? Anyway, quote, how illiberal colleges and universities limit freedom of expression to tightly regulated free speech zones and ban speakers from whom the liberal left disagrees. And quote, how truth matters little to the illiberal left for whom ideology is everything. Greg, that was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And now obviously, and what I don't like making this accusation, but this is the evidence before me. Kirsten Powers was on Fox News. She wrote this book with Geraghty, a right-of-center publisher, and it was exactly what the conservative audience of Fox News wanted to hear. Contract expires, she signs with CNN, and now she's making this argument, which is exactly what the CNN audience and host Don Lemon wants to hear. I think it's really fair to hold up the silencing to Kirsten Powers and say, did you believe any of this stuff that you wrote? Because you have now, in the last 3 years, turned around and renounced all of it when you're declaring every Trump voter racist. It's absolutely astounding. I know there's some folks where the Max Boots of the world and the Jen Rubins of the world, and I suppose you could look at that and say, okay, here are some people who, because of their experiences in the Trump presidency, they have decided that deep down conservatives they've completely reevaluated everything they stood for earlier in their career, and now they've done a 180. I find that hard to. I would never follow in those footsteps, but I guess I can say, okay, anybody who's ever changed their mind on some issue, maybe they just did it on a much bigger, broader philosophical viewpoint. I do find it kind of fascinating when stuff like Jen Rubin used to write for years about how the importance of moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, but as soon as Trump did it, it was a bad thing.
Right.
Max Boot and all of that. But in this case, Kirsten Powers was posing as, look, I'm a liberal, but I'm the liberal you can talk with. I'm the reasonable one. I'm demonstrating that while I might be liberal on role of government and taxation and all kinds of stuff like that, I do share your belief in first principles, and I don't believe that people should be shut out of conversation or demonized because they just happen to vote different from me. And 3 years later, never mind, just kidding. I totally believe all of that stuff. Ignore what I wrote 3 years ago. And, then here's the flip side. If the silencing had been this runaway bestseller, would she still hold this viewpoint?
Ooh, good question. It'd be harder to run away from it, yeah.
Well, I guess by that standard, Greg, I could write about, light lifting, how slackerdom and sleeping around and not having kids and being a deadbeat dad is really awesome because not enough people bought the other book. I don't know. It's just this bizarre mentality which you can do a 180 on this. And, Kirsten Powers has evolved into everything she was denouncing 3 years ago. But, hey, I guess she's happy over at the CNN. So, good luck for her.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be curious to see her response to that. My guess is that she would say 2015 is also the year of the escalator. And therefore, everything somehow changed. But
that's does. But that shouldn't change anything.
Oh, completely, exactly right, absolutely. Right? Oh yeah, yeah. It doesn't change the fact that she's done a 180, and hypocrisy is clearly afoot here. So, Jim, on that lovely note, we'll stop for today and pick it up again tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and be sure to tune in again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.